All right, good day, good morning, good evening, good night to you, wherever and whenever you're watching me. This is your brother and friend Maurice. What are we talking about? We are continuing our series of studies on God's temple of the heavens and the earth. Today's topic is Solomon and the temple of the heavens and earth. You're watching the new Kosmos Videocast.
This is the new Kosmos Videocast. You've never heard it like this anywhere. Welcome.
And welcome. So we are continuing this new series of studies on the theme God's temple of the heavens and earth. This is our 5th video. To see the previous 4, I will put the link to the playlist on the top right hand corner of this video. Or if I forget, you may visit the new Kosmos Videocast channel and look there to see the playlist God's temple of the heavens and earth. You will see those previous 4 videos. You will see this video as well. And all the other videos that are in this study, I will put in that playlist. Also, let me encourage you to sign up for a membership on patreon.com/newcosmos. There are 4 membership tiers. You can choose the 2nd, the 3rd, or the 4th if you want to have early access to my videos before they're released on YouTube, up to 2 weeks ahead. You can view my videos on Patreon before they're released on YouTube. And if you choose the 3rd or the 4th tiers, you can have access to the New Cosmos Masterclass. There are also other benefits associated with each of the tiers, right? And as well, let us review briefly the previous study, which was Moses and the Temple of the Heavens and Earth. We saw there that Moses constructed the wilderness tabernacle. That's the tabernacle he built while Israel was journeying in the wilderness from Egypt to Canaan, or the Promised Land. He constructed this tabernacle, and it was according to a pattern that he was shown by God. I used to think that pattern was a kind of an architectural drawing, but I have come to realize that the pattern was more of a functional layout in terms of God, his high priest, his priesthood, and then humanity. Right? In other words, the heaven of God, the heaven of the priesthood, and then the earth and sea. Okay? So today's study is Solomon and the temple of the heavens and earth. And so Solomon's temple was constructed after Israel entered the Promised Land, and they had successfully settled there. They had defeated their enemies. You had King Saul. Well, you had the judges first. Then you had where Israel requested to be under a king like the Gentiles. So they were given a king under King Saul was the first king. Then you had King David. Then David's son Solomon. Actually, David wanted to build a temple as well, a permanent structure. But he was forbidden by God, so Solomon was the one who was appointed to build this temple. Now, Solomon's temple was built to replace Moses' tabernacle, and there were similarities and there were differences. Okay, now the differences was that Solomon's temple was a permanent structure, and it was huge. All right. And built of stone, cut stone, polished stone. Also, it had extensive use of exotic wood, lavish amounts of gold, precious metals, and so on, right? Moses' sanctuary was covered with animal skins, and it was made to be disassembled, so it could be portable. They could take it down as they traveled throughout the wilderness, and also they can set it up, right? So it was portable, while Solomon's temple was a permanent structure, and the surrounding building of the sanctuary was massive, because within that building you had rooms for the priests and so on, right? And other ancillary rooms and structures added on to the outside or the surrounding of the holy places. So, but the pattern, the pattern of the sanctuaries were the same. So I have a chart here. Where I will compare the heaven and earth. That's the covenant heavens and earth, the Garden of Eden, the sanctuary, that's Moses' sanctuary, and Solomon's temple layout. All right. So first, let me zoom in a bit so we can get a better view. So we're going to begin with Eden, right? We're going to begin with Eden, and we notice on the left here we have the heavens, which are the heaven of God, the heaven of the priesthood, and then we have the earth and sea, right? So you have the heavens and the earth and sea. Now that pattern, you'll find it in Eden, where God rested in the garden, right? So that's the heaven of God, where Adam and Eve met God in the garden, and that was the heaven of God, or the most holy place. And then you have down here outside the garden, on the Eden mountain, right? In the scripture, Eden is called the mountain of God. You had where Adam's family, his son, his priests, and so on were, and that was the heaven of the priesthood, right? So, or the holy place. And then outside of Eden, you had the dust of the earth, or the regular folk, right? And then you had the sand of the sea, or the sea, right? You had the sea, which were the surrounding peripheral nations, which really had no covenant relationship with God. All right. Now, if we move over to the right here, several hundreds of years later, we had Moses' sanctuary. And as I said, Moses' sanctuary was designed to be portable, but the same layout. So you had the most holy place, which was the heaven of God. In there you had the Ark of the Covenant, right? So that was the heaven of God, right? This area. And only the high priest was allowed in this area. And then you had the holy place now, which is a bigger apartment, which was called the holy place. And that was the heaven of the priesthood, or the firmament, where you had the Levitical Aaronic priesthood. And then you had the courtyard, or the earth, where the worshippers came to bring their sacrifices, bring their offerings. And then you had a huge brass bowl, right, or basin with water, which was called the sea, right? And this represented the tiny amount of Gentiles compared to Israelites who joined themselves to Israel to worship Israel's God. And by the way, this compass here, if you notice, this compass has been turned 90 degrees, because notice the north is to the right and south is to the left, west is up and east is down, because really and truly this was the orientation of the sanctuary. So the entrance to the sanctuary was at the eastern end, right? And so you entered the sanctuary at its eastern end, and you went in and you journeyed westward as a priest, as a high priest. You journey westward into the most holy place, right? Now let's look into the Solomon's temple. As we see here, Solomon's temple was well, this is not to scale, by the way. So this outer structure around the sanctuary was quite bigger, right? But I just, just to give you an idea, but it's not to scale. And also the building was also very much taller. But anyway, but you notice the holy place and the most holy place, right? So you have the most holy place. In this area here is the most holy place where you had the Ark of the Covenant again, where the high priest alone could enter through this veil. By the way, you notice the veil over in Moses' tabernacle, the veil of purple, blue, and scarlet, which are the colors of the sky at dawn and the sunset. And also the entrance to the sanctuary was a curtain of similar colors. In Solomon's temple, you had the curtain as well as a door, a two-leaved door, right? To enter the most holy place, the high priest only. And then in the holy place, which is the firmament of the heavens of the priesthood, Levitical Aaronic priests were there as well. You had another door to enter from the courtyard. Only the priesthood could enter, and only the high priest could enter the most holy place. So you notice the pattern was the same. Okay, so you have the heavens, the first one and the second one, right? The heavens, and then you had the earth. And also in the courtyard of Solomon's temple were huge huge basin called the sea. I think there was more than one actually, if my memory serves me right. All right. So that was the pattern of the heavens and the earth. It's reflected in the meeting place of the heaven and the earth. This is where God of heaven met his people of the earth, right? And so you can see the hierarchical levels there depicted, the heaven of God to the heaven of the priesthood to earth, right? Well, it actually should be the heaven of God through his priest, to his high priest, to the priesthood, and then to the earth, right? But the high priest was the go-between between God and the priesthood, and the priesthood would be the go-between between God and the covenant people, right? So, and these temples, like Eden, because remember Eden was on the mountain of God, the temple at Jerusalem was also situated on a mountain as well. So if we go to Isaiah chapter 2, and read verse 3, you would see there that it tells you that the temple was on the mountain. All right, so we're reading from verse 2. It says, "It shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established as the highest of the mountains, and shall be lifted up above the hills, and all the nations shall flow to it." Now, if you could remember in Revelation chapter 21 and 22, when the New Jerusalem came down, you had the nations, the word there, ethnos in the Greek. Some of your Bibles will translate the word ethnos as Gentiles, but the word Gentiles really is there's nations. So the nations were flowing to that New Jerusalem. Is the fulfillment of this prophecy, right? And many people shall come and say, "Come, let us go to the mountain of the Lord," right? To the house of the God of Jacob. So this is the temple, right? So the temple was on the mountain of the Lord, right? And so these temples were like the Solomon temple, like the temple at Eden. Again, in the temple at Eden was not a physical temple, but was a functional temple. It was on a mountain. Eden was on the mountaintop. right? So you had the temple at Jerusalem was a physical and functional temple, right? But it was also situated on a mountaintop. Good. And then the New Jerusalem is a spiritual temple on a spiritual mountain. All right. And the role of the priests now, as we saw here, the role of the priest in the temple, let me just blow it up so you can see. They were the firmament, right? The heaven of the priesthood, right? They were the stars. The priests were the stars of the firmament. And their role was to teach Israel God's ways, right? So when we read here in Isaiah 2, when we go back in Isaiah 2, which we just read here, it says here, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways, and that we may walk in his path. For out of Zion shall go the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem," right? So that was the role of the priesthood, to teach the law and to teach Israel. That's the us there. Teach Israel his ways, that we may walk in his path. So that was the role of the priests in the temple. They were the stars in the firmament. Good? All right. So the most holy place of the Old Covenant sanctuary was, like the Garden of Eden, the covenant heaven of God. Okay? And the holy place, so let me just zoom out there a bit. So you had Eden, God resting in the garden, right? That's the covenant heaven. It's the most holy place. Adam, as the high priest, was in the presence of God. In Moses' sanctuary, you had the presence of God manifested above the ark. Moses was the high priest. Good. In Solomon's temple, you had the most holy place, God's presence, God's glory appearing above the ark. The high priest, whosoever that high priest was a type of Christ, and in the line of Moses, in the line of Adam. Good? Functioning in that heaven of God. That's where God's presence was. Good? So we see in the pattern all the time. Good? And then you have a curtain which separated the most holy place from the holy place. The most holy place from the holy place in Solomon's temple, in Moses' sanctuary, tabernacle. And then in the Garden of Eden, now you had the gate to the garden, which was there guarded by the cherubim. All right? The cherubim. So let us look at Exodus 26, verse 31 now. Exodus 26, verse 31. Look at this. This is amazing. Exodus, look what God told Moses when he instructed him to build the sanctuary. He said to Moses, "And you shall make a veil of blue and purple and scarlet." These are the colors of the sky, right? "Yarns and fine twined linen. It shall be made with" what? Cherubim. So you remember the cherubim in the garden, okay? They were acting as a firmament or a barrier, preventing Adam and Eve from entering the garden or the most holy place. That's after they chose the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So in Moses' tabernacle, now you had this barrier, a curtain, which was made of fine twined linen. It was blue, purple, and scarlet, representing the colors of the sky, but it had cherubim skillfully worked there, right? And it says, "You shall hang it on the 4 pillars of acacia overlaid with gold, with hooks of gold and 4 bases of silver, and you shall hang the veil from the clasps, and bring the ark of the testimony in there within the veil, and the veil shall separate for you the holy place from the most holy place." So you had this barrier with cherubim embroidered on it to separate the most holy place from the holy place, or the Garden of Eden from Eden. All right, or the presence of God from his priests, right? But before Adam had chosen the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that barrier was not there. Good. So the temple under or after Adam's choice of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that barrier came in. Okay, so you know that tree of the knowledge of good and evil really represented the old covenant system. And what was there before was the tree of life, which was really what Christ came to restore. Okay, so in Christ's temple, there is no barrier anymore. It's just like it was before when Adam first encountered God. All right, so that's amazing. All right, so we'll continue looking at the pattern of God's temple of the covenant heavens and earth in Solomon's temple when I come back. All right, so we are back and we're looking at the pattern of the heavens and earth as demonstrated in Solomon's temple. We looked at Moses' tabernacle. We looked at the Garden of Eden and Eden. And so we are continuing to look at Solomon's temple. Now, in 1 Kings 6, verse 31, it says there, for the entrance, this is in Solomon's temple, it says, for the entrance to the inner sanctuary, he, that is Solomon, made doors of olive wood. The lintel and the doorposts were 5-sided. He covered the 2 doors of olive wood with carvings of what again now? Cherubim. Okay. So notice, so if we were to put up the diagram here and look into, so this area here, let me just get rid of some of these marks. All right. So this area here is talking about this door here was a 2-leaved door. And on the door, there were carvings of cherubim. So again, this door reflected or represented this curtain, which had cherubim on it, which in turn represented this gate to the garden where the cherubim were guarding. Okay? So let's come back to the Bible. It says, so there were cherubim, there were palm trees. So you had the Garden of Eden theme, right? And open flowers, he overlaid them with gold and spread gold on the cherubim and on the palm trees. So you had a Garden of Eden theme in Solomon's temple. So that's to tell you that Solomon understood that the temple was in the layout of the Garden of Eden. So even though you did not see a physical temple in the Garden of Eden, the layout and function of Adam, God, and the garden and Eden, that was in the functional layout of a temple, which is now depicted and represented in Solomon's temple, right? In Solomon's tabernacle. He also made the entrance of the nave doorposts of olive wood in the form of a square, etc., etc., etc. Let's look at verse 35. On them, he carved cherubim and palm trees and open flowers. He overlaid them with gold and so on and so forth, right? So you had the entrance to the holy place. There were 2 doors, and on those doors you had cherubim and palm trees and so on and so forth. And then the entrance to the most holy place, you had 2 doors, same thing. So the Garden of Eden scene was there, reflected in Solomon's temple, right? So we understand that these palm trees, these cherubim, these flowers, they hearken back to the Garden of Eden. They hearken back to Genesis. And so when Adam was cast out of the garden, the cherubim were placed to prevent him from accessing the tree of life. We know that in Genesis 3:24. But look at Ezekiel 8 verse 16 now, in terms of the direction of the temple. Remember, I was telling you about the east. The door of the temple was facing east, right? So it says here, he brought me into the inner court of the house of the Lord, and behold, at the entrance of the temple of the Lord, between the porch and the altar, were about 25 men. These were priests, with their backs to the temple of the Lord, all right, and their faces toward the east. Okay, so let's put this on in the chart here now. So notice our compass, right? So these men were standing with their backs to the temple. So they were in the courtyard, right? And they were standing with their backs to the temple, and they were facing the east, right? They were facing the east. So which means behind them would be the temple. If they stand at the gate of the temple and face east, their backs would be to the west, to the temple. If they faced west, they would be facing the temple, right? So look at Genesis 3:24 now, right? Look at Genesis 3:24. When God put Adam and Eve out of the garden, look what it says. He drove out the man, and at the east of the Garden of Eden, he placed the cherubim and a flaming sword that turned every way to guard the way to the tree of life. So you notice that the exit of the garden was east. So Adam was driven to the east. So Adam's back would be toward the most holy place, right? He was not facing west. If he was facing west, he would be facing God. But when he was driven out, his back was toward God, just like the men in Ezekiel chapter 8. These things have significance. Facing the east or facing the west. Going to the east. You remember when Cain was excommunicated from Eden? He went where? East. Okay? He went east, so he went away from the temple. So his back was towards the presence of God. Good? All of these things are significant. All right? Now remember, it says here also in the Bible here, the text we just read, it says the cherubim had what? A flaming sword to guard the way to the tree of life, right? Remember that? Now, look at Numbers chapter 1, verse 51 and 53. The Levites, right? Look what it says about the Levites. It says, when the tabernacle is to set out, the Levites shall take it down. And when the tabernacle is to be pitched, the Levites shall set it up. And if any outsider comes near, he shall be put to death. All right? Now, so that means the Levites bore a sword. The cherubim bore a flaming sword. Now look at 53. But the Levites shall camp around the tabernacle of the testimony, so that there may be no wrath on the congregation of the people of Israel. And the Levites shall keep guard over the tabernacle of the testimony. Again, the cherubim were keeping guard over the garden, right? And the Levites were keeping guard of the tabernacle. So you see the correlations there, right? So this showed that Eden was the holy place and the heaven of the priesthood, while the garden was the most holy place and the heaven of God, where Adam as high priest communed with God. And after he chose the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, he was put out of the garden, and he was cast out of the most holy place, which is the heaven of God. The cherubim, like the Levites, guarded the garden entrance, restricted him to the holy place, right? So his family worshiped God at the garden gate. Likewise, the priest in Moses' sanctuary worshipped and ministered at the curtain that separated the holy place from the most holy place, where the golden cherubim were. And likewise, the priest in Solomon's temple also ministered in the holy place and worshiped at the doors that separated the holy place from the most holy place. So the priests were the lights of Israel's heavens to teach Israel God's ways, that they may walk in God's paths, as we read there in Isaiah chapter 2. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, God's ways, God's image, God's likeness. All right. So we have come to the end of this 5th video in the series of God's temple of the heavens and earth. It was entitled Solomon and the Temple of the Heavens and Earth. And if you appreciate this content, please like, please share, and please subscribe. You may support the ministry by giving or by becoming a Patreon member. There are 4 membership tiers with associated benefits at patreon.com/newcosmos. If you choose the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th tiers, you can have access to my videos before they're released on YouTube. If you choose the 3rd or the 4th, you can have access to the New Cosmos Masterclass. And if you're constantly battling anxiety and uncertainty about your relationship with God, you need this masterclass. So you may also purchase one or all of my books. You may purchase a mug, you may purchase a t-shirt, a sweater, a hoodie from the merchandise store. The links are all in the description, or if I remember, I put them in the first comment. So until next time, I'm your friend Murray saying, may God richly bless you.
This has been the New Cosmos Videocast. Remember to comment, like, subscribe, and share.